And welcome back to the Pleasant Street Podcast with your host, Taylor Nissi. Taylor, what are we talking about today?
Today, I'm really excited. We've got a wonderful guest, Joseph Wang, and we're going to be talking about box spreads, a really powerful tool that we use with a lot of our clients.
I'm looking forward to this one because I looked at the notes and I thought, I don't know box spread, and I've been around finance and economic reporting for a long time. So I'm going to kick back and learn something here. Thanks.
Today's episode is one that I'm especially excited about because I get to introduce someone whose work I use personally with clients regularly. And honestly, it's one of the more meaningful differentiators in the service that we're able to offer to our clients. My guest is Joseph Wang, co-founder and chief revenue officer of SyntheticFI. SyntheticFI is a Y Combinator-backed fintech company that launched in 2023 with a bold mission: bring institutional-grade securities-backed lending to independent financial advisors and their clients, like the folks we serve at Pleasant Street Wealth Advisors. Before SyntheticFI, access to this type of a low-cost, flexible borrowing tool was essentially reserved for hedge funds and family offices, folks like Jeff Bezos. And Joseph and his co-founder, Tony, changed that. And what they've built has allowed us to use sophisticated option strategies called box spreads to give clients access to some of the lowest borrowing rates available, rates that are fully tax deductible. And we're going to go deep into this a little bit in the podcast. And the company has grown to serve over 200 other independent RIAs, has been featured in Bloomberg, CBOE, and Financial Planning magazine. So with that, I'm excited to welcome Joseph to the podcast. Joseph, welcome to Pleasant Street Pod.
Wow, Taylor, what an intro. And one take as well. I love it. And I was like, it's a pod, so you don't see me blushing, but it's really fun to hear about your company mentioned in such a official way.
Yeah, well, we're excited to have you here. I know all of our clients who leverage your tools are super thrilled to have the opportunity to use them. So it's really wonderful to partner with you and to be able to serve our clients together. So I'm excited to share your story. Yeah. So the interesting thing about you as well is you're not just a partner of the pod or of our firm, but this is a podcast where we talk to entrepreneurs, founders of all different types of businesses, and you yourself are a founder. So let's start out, focusing on the company, SyntheticFI. Take us back to the beginning. How did the company get started? Where did you guys begin?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you mentioned in the intro that we are a YC company. So we actually got into YC 2023, right? It was just the last batch of mostly non-AI companies and just trying to figure out the one kind of the tagline YC is to build something people want, right? And that's what we started out to do. Is like, what do people actually want? My background is in finance. My background is in serving family offices. My background is working with RIAs. So it is relatively natural we looked a little bit in that area. So the funny story is we didn't start out with the box spread or the borrowing idea in general. That is one of the 4 or 5 ideas we tested with some of the RIA contacts I had. And some of the other ideas you're probably familiar with is some of the RIA AI outreach tool, right? That's actually a company now. Tax planning tool, like a smart tax planning, that's also a company now, which in hindsight, we could have done a lot more. But but when we're talking to my previous contacts and kind of presenting them with all these ideas, none of them really resonated at the time, right? Like we had a conversation, people very politely say, nod is like, oh, this is interesting. You know how those conversations go. Like, this is interesting. Keep us updated. What really cemented our conviction into actually building it into a product was 6 months in. Some advisor called me and say, hey, Joseph, remember that box spread borrowing thing you mentioned like 6 months ago? I was like, yeah, what about it? And they're like, I have a client that can really, really use this right now. You can save him a lot of money. Have you been building that? I would love to see it. And that was just like the lightning in the bottle, right? Like, build something people want. People are asking for demand. It's not even demand generation. It's demand begging me to build something. And I was like, you cannot get a signal more clear than that. And that's when we had a full conviction to go full send and build out what we set out to build. And it has been 2.5, 3 years, the company has grown. Well, compared to zero, it's infinity fold. But compared to last year, we had a pretty good, like a 20 to 30% month to month growth. And we currently serve 250-ish RAs representing somewhat about 2,000 advisors all over the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's fascinating. Just thinking about our own trajectory as our firm is growing. I think we launched in 2018. And when you mentioned some of those other tools, right, we were using Holistiplan. We introduced probably 2019 around that time. So coming into the market in 2023 with tax planning, I can see how that would be a competitive place with some of the other players. But really, I mean, what you guys offer is so unique and so powerful. I mean, I had 2 conversations today with different clients, different use cases, but they're talking about, hey, we've got a big tax bill for one of them, and one of them wants to get a new car or something. But we're talking about, where do we come up with this capital? And so we're talking about the different sources, and then we pull up the math like, hey, well, here's what it would be if you did a margin loan, right? And that's basically like 11, 12% based on these account values. It's like a credit card. Then I said, but let me show you this other tool. And they see, much lower rates, 3, 4%. And it just eyes will open wide, like, yes, why are we not doing this? So let's talk a little bit more about, what is SyntheticFI and how does it work? And let's start to explain this to folks who might not be aware of what a box spread is.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned before, I just want to add a little bit to that, right? Like you get all the tax planning tools all day, every day. You get pitch, I'm sure, 10 different AI companies, the AI outreach companies, all day, every day. But it is honestly surprising to us now and then. You still really just don't get that many liabilities or borrowing solutions out there. And the ones you get is dominated by Schwab or the big banks or just like some very legacy providers. They really, like, there was Sora, there was what's the other company called?
Uptick.
There was Sora, there was Uptick, but they both pivoted into something else. And there just haven't really been a lot of really good solutions here. And what SyntheticFI is really trying to do, hey, weaving back into the question, what SyntheticFI is trying to do is to be your partner on the liability side of the planning. We do that not by just offering software, but actual product that your clients can use in different borrowing scenarios. So what we do specifically is considered a form of security-backed lending or borrowing, right? Essentially what that means is, hey, your client has $1 million right now. They want liquidity to do really anything they want, to buy a house, to buy a car, but they don't want to sell, right? They have conviction in the market, or if selling is going to trigger a large tax bill, right? They don't want to sell. They want to keep the portfolio growing. They want to keep their planning on track, but they still want the liquidity to do their lifestyle things. What do? Instead of selling, they can use us to borrow against the portfolio, get the liquidity at very low rates, and to achieve really like whatever lifestyle demand they have at the time. I am kind of curious here, Taylor, like what are your clients using us to do right now?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And before I answer that, I want to go back because I think you said something that was really important. And I don't think our clients, I don't think consumers of financial advice kind of see this side of our world, right? Generally speaking, advisors are focusing on gathering assets, right? Your assets under management go up, your revenue grows up, all of that stuff goes up. So to your point, there really are not that many tools or even advisors that are thinking about the full balance sheet. Most people out there only care about one side. They want AUM to go up. They don't necessarily give advice around mortgages or how to access credit or how to manage a full balance sheet, especially for entrepreneurs where that balance sheet's really complicated. And to your point, the few players that were in this space pivoted and now they're doing something else. So it is, again, tremendous to have a partner like you to help us offer that full picture service to our clients because it's such a crucial part of any financial plan. So to answer your question, we've got folks who are doing things. One of our clients bought a agricultural, like a farm, a multi-million-dollar farm in a foreign country that's revenue generating. facility. That's probably the most interesting thing. And that was actually also our first use case, because compared to the other traditional strategy they were using, I think we ended up saving something like $60,000 a month in interest payments by moving over to your strategy with the much lower interest rates. We've got folks making tax payments this time of year, helping make tuition payments to college. We've got some people doing synthetic mortgages in places where, you know, they don't want to necessarily liquidate their portfolio and they'd rather, you know, borrow against their portfolio. We've got folks using it for income, right? High net worth founder who exited the business and now has, you know, a 7-8 figure portfolio. They're able to borrow against it and let the portfolio growth kind of pay back the cost of living. So there's quite a bit of different use cases that folks are leveraging. I had a call with another client the other day who's thinking about buying a business and using this tool as a way to finance that part of that purchase. So it's within our client base. It's a very flexible tool that we've seen deployed in many different ways. But you mentioned you work with about 250 other advisors. So, you know, what are some of the use cases that you're seeing?
The use cases, Taylor, that you are mentioning really kind of illustrates the point that we are really pretty suitable for almost the entire spectrum of the borrower needs, right? Like when I hear some of the more lifestyle ones, they want to pay back relatively recently or have a defined timeline. For the ones that's like mortgage or buying a business, they probably want something more stable. They want something that can last a long time, right? That's actually really kind of highlights the benefit of box spread, is that it can go from a line of credit sort of setting to a fixed rate sort of setting that is more akin to a mortgage, right? And that also illustrates your question asking me is like, hey, what are your clients using the box spread for? And the only thing I can say is all sorts of things. Like I have a client this morning to ask me about a kitchen remodel, and I helped him pick the color. So not necessarily the most relevant, but you know, still a fun thing to have. I have a client who is on a buy, borrow, die strategy. Basically, the idea is to minimize cash outflow as much as possible to kind of like to essentially leave the assets for the next generation to get a step-up basis. I have a client who are in highly concentrated portfolios who want to use box spread to borrow and then diversify. We are in Silicon Valley. I have clients to borrow to do angel investing, right? There's just like a spectrum of use cases. One of the use cases I can highlight is I use it to pay off my credit card. And that's the exact quote Bloomberg used to append to our end of the to our feature to make me sound like I can't pay off my credit card, which is not true. So for the friends of the pod, I can pay off my credit card, guys. Like this, I absolutely can do. What I was really doing here is that I believe my portfolio can grow more than 4% per year. That's around the box spread rate you get today, right? So I believe my portfolio can grow like 8%, 12%, just based on a steady stock market in the long term. So what I do is I put all my all my income, I put all my income into my investment portfolio, and I use a box spread to take out some cash to pay off my credit card each month, which I put almost all my expenses on. So the benefit is I get to build wealth at a relatively young age while hoarding those credit card points, you know? So that's also a big, nice quirk, like a nice perk. Yeah.
And so you mentioned there, you know, the box spread current rate is about 4%. So, you know, again, can you explain to folks out there, and maybe I'll explain part of it first, and then I'll defer over to you about where the rates are coming from. But, you know, when we talk about a box spread, folks, what we're talking about is a put and a call above the market and a put and a call below the market. You're shorting two of them and you're going long, meaning buying the others. So when you go short, you're selling and you're bringing in option premium. And that's the amount that you're borrowing. So when we're talking about these borrowing cases, right, let's say I wanted to borrow $100,000, I'm going to short sell 2 positions, and that's going to create the options premium, correct? Joseph, am I getting
That
all
is
this
correct.
right?
Yes. Yep.
Yep. So that I'm going to sell 2 options at $50,000 each. That's going to give me $100,000 to go do whatever I need to do. And then to protect the risk on the other side, I'm going to go long 2 options. And that way, if the market moves up or down, my risk is protected and I'm not going to necessarily lose money. But I'm always going to owe that $100,000 because of the way the risk's managed by Joseph and his team. So when we're putting these 4 options into place, how are the rates coming out at this 4% rate? Like, where is that coming from? And why is that such an opportunity for borrowers out there today?
Absolutely, Taylor. I think I want to stress one point is that in your description, the outcome is locked in. So when you say, hey, I want to borrow 100K, that means you will absolutely do 100K no matter what happens, no matter how the market moves, no matter how your portfolio moves, you'll absolutely do 100K at the end of the borrowing period. This is not a function. It's actually not a function of us managing the risk. It's really more of a function of the innate characteristic of a box spread is to lock in that final outcome. It's almost like, Taylor, I'm telling you, I'm going to pay you 100K in a year, right? And I want you to give me some cash now. How much would you give me? Now, you here is the option market. You here are foundations. You here are hedge funds, are wealthy individuals who are looking for a good return. You would think, hey, Joseph, I don't know who Joseph is. So that might be risky. But I know 2 things. I know he has assets. I know this transaction is backed by the Options Clearing Corporation, which basically guarantees that I will get my 100K back. Right? Options Clearing Corporation, OCC, has never failed, even during 08, has never failed to clear any contracts. As a result, you trust me, Taylor, you trust me that I will give you 100K in a year. So you give me around 95K. And how do you determine that? It is determined by your own cost of capital, so the prevailing market cost of capital, plus a little bit of spread. Right? You want to make a little bit of money, right? You don't want to give it for free. It's your cost of capital plus a little bit of spread. And what is cost of capital in the capital markets? Essentially treasuries, right?
Yep.
Slightly over treasuries. That's pretty much it. That's why we see the short-term rates, the medium-term, the long-term rates, all just SOFR or treasuries plus a small spread, generally around 20 to 30 bips.
Yep. And so in this case, right, the counterparty is the options market itself, the Options Clearing Corporation, as you mentioned. It's not necessarily Charles Schwab or Bank of America, and that's the counterparty, right? So you don't have to you don't have the same, to your point, they've never not cleared a contract. Even in 2008, they've covered all the options that were out there. So you don't have that same counterparty risk, and you have a generally much more attractive interest rate, perhaps mechanically because there's no counterparty that's trying to maximize profits on the other side. It's just trying to make a market. Am I kind of getting that correct?
Absolutely. So the counterparty here technically is the OCC itself, right? It's guaranteeing everything, is making sure the transaction is happening. And if you have to compare risk, Schwab Bank versus OCC, I trust OCC. You know what I mean? Like it has a higher credit rating, has really never failed to do anything, right? Like I trust almost like too big to fail clearing agency in this particular instance. And because all these are guaranteed, and also because how big a market this is, it clears $1 billion of just box spread, over $2 billion box spread borrowings per day, right? Wow. New borrowings per day. And the entire SPX options market, which is the index option that we use, is a $4 trillion market per day.
Wow.
Right? Because how large, how liquid this market is, any profit, if you believe in efficient market hypothesis, any extra profit here is arbitraged away by some smart market maker, either Citadel, be it Susquehanna, be it like Jane Street on the other side, to be able to maximize their profit so we can get the most efficient borrowing so that Schwab or TriState or Fidelity is not charging 1%, 2% on top of what should be the efficient market.
Yep. Yeah. And the other thing too that I think so many of our clients get excited about is the tax deductibility angle, right? Unlike other types of loans, you do have that capital loss deductibility in all scenarios, right? Can you talk a little bit about the tax deductibility function of a box spread?
Absolutely. I also just want to preface I'm not a tax attorney. I am not a CPA. I want to make sure that our compliance officer is happy and glad I'm doing this. Ultimately, like box spread is a trade, right? When I say interest, Taylor, when you say interest, it's more like a cost to capital, or in another phrase, another way, a cost of carry, right? What realistically happens is when you borrow with a box spread, you get $95K today, you pay $100K in a year. And the negative $5K, the $5K that you have to pay extra is the interest. And that extra is a capital loss because you essentially quote unquote lost that amount of money in this in the duration of the year when you carry the security. As a result, this is an index option. All the losses are subject to Section 1256 of the IRS code, which means 60% of the losses, or AKA interest, can be used as long-term capital loss deduction. 40% of it can be used as a short-term capital loss deduction. And obviously, capital losses can be carried forward, but if you don't have any, you have $3,000 that you can use.
Yep. And for folks out there, right, the $3,000 offsets your ordinary income, and otherwise you can carry forward any losses indefinitely until you've used them by offsetting other capital gains in your portfolio, or just that $3,000 deduction year over year. So again, it is a very powerful tool from liquidity perspective, interest rate perspective, tax perspective. And as Joseph and I mentioned earlier, there's so many different use cases for it depending on your needs. So let's
Taylor, I want to also just to add slightly on that, is also great on a planning perspective, right? Taylor, I'm sure you are very good at tax planning. Like, what can you do with, let's say, $10,000 or $30,000 or $50,000 of additional tax losses per year? I'm sure you have like 1,000 strategies that you can optimize the portfolio for.
Absolutely. Depending on the client case, there's a lot of opportunities that open up with that type of a capital loss. And again, how are we deploying that loss, the capital generated in the plan? So you're getting it on both sides. You're getting the additional liquidity plus the loss. It's really quite a tool.
Yeah.
So let's talk more about, your experience as a founder, right? You're building a fintech company in a space that's traditionally been dominated by these big banks and these big custodians. But as we said, this is a space that's sort of overlooked. There's not a lot of people operating it. So, what's your unfair advantage, or what's your differentiator? How are you finding success scaling so quickly, going to over 250 partnerships nationwide? What is working, and how are you going to market in competing in that type of an environment?
Yeah, I mean, like, I can tell you all day how I had a finance background, how I traded box spreads for the family office, how I have been building kind of apps and startups for a decent amount of time. But honestly, when you ask about unfair advantage, I would say the one thing I have really, really helped me is this unearned confidence to do what I think is meaningful, right? I could rely on my family office job or like a first employee of another company, just kind of coast, right? Why do I want to build something that I'm excited about? Is because I believe this could be meaningful for advisors, for people that has stocks, for like someone like me, right? I personally use it. My co-founder use it. I want to build something that I am be proud of, and with that, I carry this type of like, I believe I'm doing something right here. Please listen, right? Like, I have this confidence that I can help people to do something even better. That kind of really carried me through a lot of conversations. When the conversation becomes, it's not like, hey, I'm begging you to use us. It's like, hey, I'm helping you to solve a very particular problem, and you should be actually asking me how I can better help you, right? So that level, especially that level of confidence in someone, like when I talk to someone that's, let's say, 40 years of my elder, I think it's really refreshing because they don't really see this kind of attitude a lot. They don't really see people that are confident to present them as something that's genuinely useful as well, right? That confidence wouldn't work if we are just selling some snake oil. We're selling something that actually works. We have a great product, and we have the confidence to talk to you to sell it to make sure that this is helpful for your client. I think those things combined is our kind of unfair advantage. It's just kind of this kind of fearlessness and confidence and conviction in what we're doing is really helpful to not just the advisors, but to everyone involved in the chain. They might not love us, but for everyone else in the chain, like we're doing a good thing that's creating value.
Yeah. And I think that's so powerful because again, when we first were introduced to your tools, the first case was like, okay, this makes sense. And then all of a sudden, through more and more client conversations, it's like, well, this actually really does solve real problems and gives a lot more freedom. I mean, today, again, I was talking to a client who was stressed about their tax bill. And as we went through the strategy and what we recommended, there was just that sense of relief. Like, I mean, so there's all those statistics out there. So many Americans get concerned about finances or aren't sure, that's the major stressor in people's lives. So being able to unlock that liquidity and solve some of these problems when you've had a great year as a founder and you just don't have that liquidity, and then all of a sudden there's a solution that, hey, here's some really low cost capital, by the way, with some tax benefits, as we talked about, we can just solve this problem for you here. This doesn't even need to be a problem. And to your point, right, if we're borrowing at 4 and growing at 8, you've got the cash, your net worth is going to go up, and you got a tax deductibility, just the relief washed across the client's face. And I asked her, I said, how do you feel? You feel better? She's like, yeah, Taylor, I feel great. This is amazing. I can't believe that. I feel so relieved. I was having a migraine earlier. Now I just feel like I understand so much more flexibility within our plan, and I'm really excited about it. So it really, you guys really are doing some great work.
Yeah, I mean, like one statistic I can tell you is around 25% of our advisor clients actually use it for themselves. And I have over 20 of my friends and family using our product. But like it does show that, especially in the Silicon Valley, especially with people like entrepreneurs, like people who have stock compensation, this is almost table stakes to what they're trying to do, to what they're trying to achieve, right? Like, and it's just really exciting that I am able to help out a community that is very near and dear to me.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Joseph, as a founder yourself, right, you're living an experience that many of our listeners are in the middle of right now. So, what's the most interesting thing about building SyntheticFI that nobody really talks about?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think two things, right? Like one thing that's really interesting / fascinating to me is just to see how people use us, right? There are so many things I just don't think about people using borrow money for that does make sense in certain scenarios. Like we had a client who bought a boathouse, and I was very miffed if I didn't get an introduction and get an invitation. We have a client who's refinancing their car loans. We had a client who bought a weird plane. And so these are all, and we had a client who bought a record, like a rare record with it. So those are all things I was like, we are really just like reaching out to this vast, interesting collection of like human consumption that I'm just not aware of before. So that's super interesting to me. The other is also just to figure out what the demand really is and what people want to see in the product. And that's something you can never really plan for, right? As an entrepreneur, I feel like I always have this vision of what I want to build. But again, going back to the mantra of like build something people want, what dictates the final product is never yourself. What dictates the final product is the advisor, is the end client, is someone who actually uses your product, right? Like, for example, to give you an example, one thing we built into our system is a ledger of cash transaction in, cash transaction out. How people want that displayed, or whether or not people want that displayed, is very unintuitive to us. I thought people really want to see like, hey, like how much I have paid this month or how much I need to pay like next month. But in reality, if you display that data to the end client, a lot of what we get is like anxiety, right? Why has this moved so much? Like why am I paying this particular number? Like how is that number calculated? It becomes a lot more anxiety inducing than helpful when we list out leg by leg how the options was moving. So in the end, we have decided to combine 4 legs of options and report it as one borrowing entity. So the end client really only says, hey, I have this loan for this long. I'm paying this amount of interest. This has accrued so far. And that's really the level of detail that anyone really cares about, right? And that is level of product design that you really only learns when you talk to your users, talk to the advisor, talk to the end client to make sure that what you imagine that's going to be helpful is actually helpful for the advisor and for the end client.
One thing I want to share with you too is a use case that I don't think we've talked about. So I'm actually driving up to Massachusetts tomorrow to see one of my favorite clients, and they're in a unique situation where, they've got a substantial amount of assets and they've got kids that are growing up. They're in their 30s and 40s, and they want to give them money and they want to help them, but they don't necessarily want to start spending down all of their accounts. And so I've talked with them. They're not super tech savvy. They're probably never going to see this podcast or hear this podcast, but they're not really the screen share type people is what I'm saying. So I was explaining at a high level, if your goal is to give X to the kids, we can do that without actually selling securities, and we can start that giving process earlier. So we're going to partially use some box spreads. We're going to do some other things as well, but it's going to, number one, enable these clients to give with the warm hand and make sure that their kids have the money to do the things that they need to do now, buy houses, pay their kids tuition, and really unlock that ability to do all that now instead of waiting for an insurance policy to kick in, after life. So it's a really tremendous tool that, again, another great use case, but now we're unlocking sort of a charitable leg to it where, the parents are borrowing and paying the cash. And, to the strategy you talked about earlier, right? Eventually the assets the parents retain will step up in basis and they'll be distributed through the estate, but it's giving the parents the peace of mind to do it now. It's making a positive impact on the kids, giving them some breathing room when they need it the most. And it really, again, unlocks this other piece of consumption that probably wouldn't have happened otherwise without tools like yours. So you guys really are doing some tremendous work, and the way that we can deploy these across plans can really do so much for our clients. So we're really thrilled to be working with you.
Absolutely. And Taylor, I also want to thank you. We rely on advisors to telling us what our clients are using us for, and we are continuously iterating to build tools that can better help you to plan out those scenarios. Right. One thing we are launching pretty recently, we are launching a client portal, so that a lot of times advisors say, hey, what do my clients actually see? Currently, they really just see their statements and their Schwab or Fidelity portal. But going forward, we would have a client dashboard that clients can actually see exactly what they're borrowing, how much they're borrowing for how long, so that they can have more visibility. And when you discuss with your client, it gives you extra leverage as well.
Very cool. That's tremendous. So let's wrap up with a little bit of fun question here. So, what is something that you're reading, watching, piece of content that you're consuming these days? What are you into outside of the office, outside of work?
For an entrepreneur, that's a question that does not have an answer. What is outside of work? What is outside of office? I don't know the concept. But recently, I guess not so recently, I got into, I think it's a pretty old show by now, BoJack Horseman. So has been, have you heard about the show?
Yeah, I think I watched it back in the day. Yeah. That's a very funny show. Yeah.
I recently got Netflix, so you can see how I'm recently trying to relax a little bit more. So I got Netflix, and that got introduced to me. And one of key things in there is really just a level of self-improvement, right? A core theme in there is that everyone is somewhat flawed. Everything needs to be improved, and you need to both take the responsibility of your flaws, but also to improve so that people around you could not be hurt by you. And that really has a lot of like impact on me, because when we trying to like develop both kind of like, how do I phrase it? When we trying to develop the products and when we trying to think about what I do all day, every day, like I need to think about, hey, what is it contributing to the society, right? Like, what is it really contributing to the society, to me, to the people around me? Like, is it meaningful? How can I make sure it is? Like, how does it align with my own values? And how can I, if it doesn't, can we mitigate it somehow, right? Like, it really is a more profound, like, thought process for me in my everyday work than really like what the 20-minute sitcom is actually appeared to be to start. So I guess I got into a rabbit hole of just binge watching that show, which is not even a new show. But I hope like if anyone hasn't watched that show before, I highly recommend it.
That made me laugh. Because, Joseph, I've known a lot of entrepreneurs, and I immediately recognized your answer with there is no outside work. So it's like, I didn't know where you were going to go with that one. I want to applaud you for finding something that made you laugh and, gave you some entertainment, and also maybe gave you a little insight into everything else that goes on in the world. So that's great. Fascinating conversation. Thank you very much, Joseph. I appreciate you coming on with Taylor and talking about your product and the process of inventing it, which is a little bit different than build it and they will come. It's more along the lines of, what do you need? We can build that. So thanks. And Taylor, thank you for having Joseph on. For people who are listening to this podcast who probably aren't clients of yours at this point, who find what you were talking about fascinating and want to maybe have a further conversation with you, what is the best way for them to reach out and get a hold of you?
Sure. So in our show notes, you can schedule a call. You can also find a link to my LinkedIn, which is a great way to see other content and learn more about our firm. And you can DM me on LinkedIn. And we also have a great 3-minute quiz for folks who are entrepreneurs or business owners who are experiencing some growth. And you're trying to figure out if your wealth strategy is keeping up with that growth and if your vision is on track. So that's another great way to get some quick feedback. And through there'll be options to schedule a call. And
the podcast, the website is?
PleasantStreetWealth.com.
Okay, great. Fantastic. The other thing you can do, folks, if you're listening to this and you are not yet a subscriber, is just hit follow. Really simple. Will cost you nothing. It's free. And the beauty of that is that you will be reminded to listen every time Taylor drops a new episode of this podcast. So we'll welcome you back as a subscriber. Until next time, I'm Bill Tucker. On behalf of Taylor and everybody at Pleasant Street Podcast, thanks for taking the time to listen today. We will catch you next time.
Thank you for joining us on the Pleasant Street Pod. Be sure to follow the show so you never miss a new episode. To learn more, visit PleasantStreetWealth.com or give us a call at 518-363-9363. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the guest and do not necessarily reflect those of Pleasant Street Wealth Advisors, LLC or Farther Finance Advisors, LLC. This content is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered professional investing advice. Always consult your financial advisor or another qualified provider with questions about your investment planning.